Hey everyone. I never thought I'd be the guy to post here, but I need to get this out of my system. Maybe someone out there has been through something similar. Maybe I just need to see it all written down to make sense of it. I don't know, but here goes. My name is Ethan. A year ago, my life was normal. Good, even. I had a stable job, a wife I adored, and the kind of life I thought I'd always have. Then one night, everything changed. I don't remember much about the accident. I was driving home from work, late as usual. I had taken on some extra hours because Laura, my wife, had been pushing for us to go on a vacation. Something fancy, somewhere tropical. I figured, why not? She deserved it. I wanted to make her happy. Next thing I know, I wake up in a hospital bed and I can't move. Not my legs, not my arms, not even my fingers. I can hear everything, see everything, but I can't respond. When I try to speak, nothing comes out. It's like I'm trapped inside my own body. Laura was there at first, holding my hand, crying, telling me everything was going to be okay. The doctor said I had locked-in syndrome, which means my brain was working fine, but my body wasn't listening. They didn't know if I'd ever recover. I guess that was too much for Laura, because after a few weeks, the visits got shorter. Then she stopped coming every day, then every few days. And then Greg started showing up more. Greg, my neighbor, my friend, a guy who was always a little too friendly with Laura, but I never thought much of it. He was married, too, had a wife of his own, though I noticed she wasn't around much. At first, Greg acted like he was just there to check in on me. He'd bring food, sit with me, tell me about what was going on in the neighborhood. But then the comments started. "She's really struggling, man," he'd say, shaking his head like he felt bad. "It's hard for her, taking care of you like this. You can't blame her for needing a little break." I didn't understand what he meant at first. Not until the first time I saw him put his hand on Laura's back while she was standing by my bed. She didn't even flinch. And that was just the beginning that I don't know exactly when it started. The affair, maybe it was happening before the accident, or maybe Greg saw an opportunity and took it. Either way, I had no way of stopping it. At first, it was small things. The way Laura started dressing up more when Greg was around. The way they'd whisper to each other when they thought I couldn't hear. The way her phone would light up at night, and she'd grab it fast, texting back with a little smirk on her face. Then Greg got bolder. He stopped pretending. He'd pull up a chair next to my bed, lean in real close, and talk to me like I was his personal audience. "Ethan, it's funny," he said one night, swirling a drink in his hand while Laura was in the other room. "You spend your whole life thinking you're the man of the house, the one in control. And then, boom, one accident, and suddenly you're nothing, just a body in a bed." I wanted to scream, to break something, to grab him and throw him out of my house. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink fast enough to show anger. Greg just chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. "Laura's been lonely. You can't blame her for that. A woman has needs, He tilted his head at me, like he was waiting for a response. "Oh, right. You can't talk. Guess you don't have much of an opinion on it, huh?" I could hear Laura laughing in the kitchen. It wasn't her usual laugh, the one she used to have when we were happy. This one was different, forced, high-pitched, like she was trying too hard. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just letting this happen. She was in on it. I had held on to some stupid hope that maybe Greg was manipulating her, that she felt trapped. But no, she was choosing this, choosing him. And worse, she was letting him humiliate me in my own home. And it only got worse from there. One night, I woke up to something new. A camera, sitting right in the corner of my room. A little red light blinking, pointed directly at my bed. That's when I knew. Greg didn't just want my wife. He wanted me to see everything he was taking from me. I didn't sleep that night. Not that I really could. Anyway, the blinking red light from the camera was all I could see. My own wife, my own so-called friend, setting this up just to torment me. The next morning, Laura walked in, acting like everything was normal. She fluffed my pillow, adjusted my blanket, and gave me the sweet, fake smile. "Did you sleep okay, honey?" she asked, like she actually cared. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to ask her how she could do this to me. But, of course, I couldn't do any of that. That's when Greg strolled in, coffee in hand, acting like he owned the place. He leaned against the wall, looking at me, then at Laura. "He's been quiet this morning," Greg said with a smirk. "Guess that means he's getting used to it." Laura giggled, tucking her hair behind her ear the way she used to when we were first dating. "I told you he'd adjust," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. Adjust? Like I was just supposed to accept this. Then, as if this was the most normal thing in the world, Greg walked over and kissed her, right in front of me. Slow, deep, hands all over her. And she didn't pull away. She melted into it, right there in our bedroom. I felt like I was dying. Greg turned his head slightly, just enough to look at me while he was still kissing her. Then, without breaking eye contact, he grinned against her lips. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Laura. It wasn't just about them being together. This was about me. About making sure I knew I was nothing now. That Greg had taken everything from me. My wife, my home, my dignity. And there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. And I still had no idea just how much worse it was going to get. After that morning, everything changed. Greg didn't bother pretending anymore. He started making himself at home, sitting in my chair, drinking my whiskey, walking around in just his boxers like he owned the place. And Laura? She let him. No, she encouraged it. She stopped visiting me out of guilt, stopped holding my hand, stopped pretending to care. She'd walk past my bed like I was a piece of furniture, something to step around, not someone she once loved. And the camera? It wasn't just for recording. One night, Greg brought in a tablet and propped it up on my nightstand. "I figured you want a front row seat," he said with a smirk. Laura was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. But she didn't stop him. Greg tapped the screen, and suddenly I saw myself. The camera feed was live, showing me lying there helpless, from the corner of the room. Then he switched the view, and I saw their bedroom. My bedroom. Laura sitting on the edge of our bed, looking down at her hands. "I don't think we should do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Greg chuckled, stepping behind her, running his hands over her shoulders. "Come on, babe. He's right there. He can't do anything about it. Might as well enjoy yourself." I wanted to shut my eyes, but I couldn't. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I could only watch. Laura hesitated for a second, just a second, but then she turned her head and kissed him, and that was the night I broke. I thought that would be the worst of it, that there was nothing they could do to make it worse. I was wrong, because after that night, Greg started bringing his friends over, and they all knew. Greg started treating my house like his own personal clubhouse. At first, it was just him and Laura, but then the others started showing up, his friends. Loud, arrogant guys who never used to step foot in my home before the accident. Now, they walked in like they owned the place, cracking open my beers, putting their feet on my furniture, talking about me like I wasn't even there. At first, I thought maybe Laura would at least try to stop it. She still had some shame, right? Wrong. One night, Greg walked into my room with two of his buddies, laughing and joking. He sat on the edge of my bed and patted my arm, like I was some pet on display. "Boys, meet Ethan," Greg said, grinning. "Hard-working guy. Used to be a real go-getter. Now, well, he just kind of lays there." They laughed. I felt sick. One of them, a guy named Derek, leaning close, looking me over like I was some science experiment. "Man, you're really just stuck, huh?" "Completely," Greg confirmed. "Can't talk, can't move. Just watches. Isn't that right, Ethan?" I wanted to kill him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight. But all I could do was stare. Greg stood up and stretched. "Anyway, drinks are in the kitchen. Laura's making us something to eat." Derek smirked. "She a good cook?" Greg laughed. "She's good at a lot of things." They all laughed again. I felt something inside me snap. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about humiliating me anymore. Greg wanted to erase me. He wanted to turn me into a ghost in my own home. and I was powerless to stop it, or so they thought, because what they didn't know was that something was about to change. Something big. Days blurred together after that. The humiliation, the laughter, the way Greg paraded Laura around like she was his prize, all became routine. I was trapped in my own home, my own body, forced to watch everything be taken from me. But then, something changed. One afternoon, when the house was quiet, a new face walked into my room. A doctor. I hadn't seen him before, but he had this calm, confident look about him. He pulled up a chair next to my bed, checked my chart, then looked right at me. Unlike everyone else, he didn't talk to me like I wasn't there. "Ethan," he said, "I know you can hear me." I felt my heartbeat quicken. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I've been reviewing your case, and I think there's something we can do." For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him what he meant, but all I could do was stare, praying he saw the desperation in my eyes. The doctor glanced at the door, making sure we were alone. Then he leaned even closer. "There's an experimental procedure," he whispered. "It's risky, but if it works, you could get your movement back." My whole body, what little I could feel of it, went numb. Movement. A chance to fight. A chance to take my life back. I felt a tear slip from the corner of my eye. The doctor nodded like he understood. "I need your consent, Ethan. If you want to try, blink twice." I blinked. Once. Then again. The doctor exhaled, sitting back. "All right," he said. "Then let's get started." And just like that, everything changed. After months of feeling like a prisoner in my own body, my mind was racing for the first time in forever. The doctor, his name was Dr. Harris, started coming in more often, running quiet tests when no one else was around. Small things, like poking my fingertips, shining a light in my eyes, checking for the slightest muscle reaction. And then one day it happened. I moved. It was barely anything, just a twitch in my left index finger. But to me, it was everything. Dr. Harris saw it too. His face remained calm, professional, but I could see the excitement in his eyes. "Good," he murmured. "That's good, Ethan." I wanted to scream in relief. I wanted to shout, "I'm coming back." But we had to be careful, because outside of this room, Greg and Laura were still living like I was already dead, and they had no idea what was coming. That night, Greg stumbled into my room, drunk. He did that a lot lately, drinking, lounging around in my house like he owned it. "You know, Ethan," he slurred, plopping down in the chair beside me, "I gotta say, I feel kind of bad for you." Liar. He swirled his drink, staring at me, stuck in that body, watching everything slip away. Man, if I were you, I'd go crazy. I wanted to smirk. "You have no idea." Then he leaned in, lowering his voice. "I should probably tell you," he whispered. "Laura, she's been thinking about leaving you for good." My chest tightened. Greg smirked, taking another sip. "Yeah, she's been talking about divorce, selling the house. Moving on." He let out a fake sigh. Can't say I blame her. What kind of life is this, right? I stared at him, burning this moment into my memory. He thought he had won. He thought I was powerless. But what Greg didn't know was that I had already started to curl my fingers into a fist. Greg had no idea. As he sat there, slurring his words, gloating about how Laura was moving on, I was silently testing my body, feeling the tiniest sparks of control creeping back into my fingers. It wasn't much. Not yet. But it was something, and something was all I needed. The next few days were a test of patience. Dr. Harris told me not to rush. Small progress was still progress. Every night, when the house was quiet, I worked. I focused every ounce of strength on my fingers, then my wrists, then my arms. It was slow, agonizingly slow, but I was getting stronger. And soon, Greg started to notice. "Did you see that?" he muttered one night after tossing his jacket onto my bed. He stared at my hand. I swear it moved. Laura barely looked up from her phone. "You're imagining things." Greg frowned, stepping closer, waving a hand in front of my face. "Nothing. I stayed still, controlled. I wasn't ready yet. Then came the night that changed everything. Greg had his usual routine. Come into my room, throw some insult my way, then head off to bed with Laura. But tonight, as he turned to leave, I did something different. I blinked. Twice. Greg froze. His eyes narrowed. What the... I did it again. Slowly. Deliberately. Greg took a step back, rubbing his face. Nah, no way. He chuckled nervously. But I could see it. The first flicker of doubt, of fear. I blinked again. Greg stumbled out of the room, mumbling to himself. And for the first time in months, I was the one laughing inside. Because I wasn't just coming back. I was coming back with a purpose. Greg didn't sleep well that night. I could hear him pacing outside my room, muttering under his breath. Did I really see that? Was it just my imagination? Good. Let him wonder. Let him start to doubt. Because I wasn't just getting stronger, I was getting ready. Dr. Harris came in the next morning, as usual, except this time, when he checked my arm, I did more than just twitch my fingers. I moved my hand. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second before he schooled his face back into professionalism. That's excellent progress, Ethan, he said quietly. Then, lowering his voice, we're getting close. Close. The word sent a rush of adrenaline through me, because I knew what it meant. It meant soon, very soon, I was going to show Greg and Laura that they hadn't won, that the helpless, broken man they thought they had crushed wasn't just coming back. He was coming for them. That night, Greg was still on edge. He sat on the couch, drinking, flipping through channels mindlessly. Laura sat next to him, scrolling on her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. Finally, Greg blurted, I think Ethan's waking up. Laura barely glanced at him. Don't be stupid. I'm serious, Greg snapped. I saw him blink. Twice. On purpose. Laura rolled her eyes. He blinks all the time. No. This was different, Greg insisted. He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely unsettled. It was like he knew what he was doing. I watched from my bed, silent, expressionless. Laura sighed. Even if he is waking up, what's he going to do? She smirked, leaning in closer to Greg. It's not like he can hurt you. Greg chuckled, but there was no confidence behind it. I let them believe that. For now. Because soon, they'd find out just how wrong they were. And when that day came, I wouldn't just take back my life. I'd take my revenge. Greg was rattled. I could see in the way he avoided my room, and how he jumped at small noises. He tried to play it cool, but doubt had taken root. And Laura? She was getting tired of his paranoia. You're being ridiculous, she snapped one night when Greg refused to sleep in there, my bedroom. Greg paced near the window, rubbing his face. I'm telling you, something's off. What if he cut himself off, shaking his head. What if he is waking up? Laura scoffed. So what? He still can't do anything. I wanted to smile. That's what you think. Dr. Harris kept working with me in secret. Every session, I regained more control. First my fingers, then my hand, then my wrist. And finally, the moment I had been waiting for, I moved my arm. Not a twitch, not a tremor, a full, undeniable lift. Dr. Harris sucked in a breath. Ethan, he leaned in, gripping my shoulder. It's time. Time to end this nightmare. Time to take back my life. Time to make them pay. That night, I made my first move. Greg had gotten careless. He left his phone charging on the table beside my bed. He thought I was still helpless. I wasn't. It took everything in me, all my strength, all my focus, but I did it. I reached out, my fingers wrapped around the phone, and I pulled it onto the floor. The thud echoed through the silent house. Seconds later, Greg stormed into the room. His eyes darted from the table to the floor, then to me. He looked pale. Laura appeared behind him, sighing. Did you really drag me in here for this? Greg swallowed hard. It wasn't there before. Laura rolled her eyes. Then it fell. Big deal. Greg's hands curled into fists. What if he moved it? Silence. For the first time, I saw something flicker across Laura's face. Doubt. She looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time in months, there was no boredom in her eyes, no indifference. There was fear. Good, because this was only the beginning.